Hello, welcome to a new episode in the FLTK Rust series. So this is a basics tutorial. If you remember, a few months ago we had a basics tutorial. However, this time FLTK has seen its 1.0 release several months ago actually, and we'll be using the new API and some other crates in the FLTK ecosystem. They're all grouped in the FLTK-rs GitHub organization. And I've gone ahead and just created a new cargo project, cargo new app basically, and we'll add FLTK as a dependency. So we'll be using FLTK 1.1, and let's just make sure this builds. Cargo run. So you can see this built really quick. I've gone ahead and just ran the build for the video, so this wouldn't take too long. And our main is basically a simple print line, hello world. We'll be using FLTK, so use FLTK, and we'll import several modules from FLTK. If you remember from the previous basics video, we could basically import anything, and traits will be imported automatically. However, this time with the FLTK 1.0, we need to explicitly also import the prelude to get the FLTK traits, and then you can use whatever you need. So the first thing, as always, in our boilerplate code, we start with the abstract. So let A equals app default. Then we'll need to basically create a window. And basically in FLTK we have two constructors. I'll just go ahead and just import window here. We basically have two main constructors. The new constructor, which basically takes 5 arguments: the x, y, the width, height, and the label, whatever label. For example, the window, the label will show on the title bar. And the other constructor is the default constructor, which basically allows us to use a builder pattern for our widgets. So we'll use first the new constructor, and then we'll take a look at the default constructor. So we'll go just specify the y to be like 100, the x 100, the y 100, and then the width, let's say 400, the height 300, and the label, let's say my window. And our windows basically implement the group trait. That means that when we finish our window, we need to call win end, and then we need to show it, and then we can run our app. So this is the minimal boilerplate code that we need to basically show a window. So basically, if we just call cargo run, and we need to import app, the app module. So you can see the title here, my window, and the it started at the position 100, 100, and the width is 400, and the height 300, and the label. If we use the default constructor, we can basically call default with no arguments, and then we can specify, for example, the size 400, 300. You can specify the position with label, for example, my window. And this will basically have the same effect. However, since we don't specify the position, this is a free position. The window manager can basically place the window wherever it wants. So let's start adding some widgets. If we wanted to add, for example, a button inside our window, we'll also import the button module. We'll be using a normal button, and same thing with the button as with the window. We have two main constructors, the new constructor and the default constructor. Here we'll be using the default constructor and basically giving it a size, for example 80/30, and let's say we'll position it at the center of parent, which is the window in this case. And let's give it a label. So you can see this is the builder pattern. Click. So we get our window here with the button itself. And if you remember also from the previous video, basically to give it a a callback, we use the set callback method. And as a difference from the previous basics tutorial, if you remember previously we used to basically box the callback, and then the closure capture basically was an empty capture. However, now basically we move. The closure capture is the same as the button here, which we'll be referencing as B. And we can basically, for example, change B's label, B set label, and let's say clicked. When we click the button, and the window, let's move the window inside the closure here. So when set label as well, let's say button clicked. So when we click here, this gets changed to clicked, and the Windows label is changed to button clicked. So these are basically the main differences with the since the 1.0 release is the capture for the widget itself, and the callback method, and the handle method, and the importance of importing the prelude into our application. You don't need to basically import everything from the prelude. You can import whatever you need. So for example here, we need the widget base, since we call the constructors. We need the widget X, since we basically call set label and with size. And we need the group trait, since we call when end. This should do it. So even we don't need the widget base, since we use the default constructor, which is just the default trait. If we use, for example, the new constructor here, let's say 160, 200, 80, 30, click. This will use the widget base module trait. So basically you've noticed that the basic layout and themes in FLTK are a bit difficult to work with, so we'll be using two crates from the FLTK ecosystem, the FLTK theme and the FLTK flex crates, which gives us a flexbox widget. So let's import these as well. So both are at version 0.1 and theme 0.1. Let's run the build. So now let's use them. So in here, you can basically use FLTK flex. Well, let's use the theme first. Basically need the widget theme and the theme type. You can find more info in the FLTK theme crate or the repo itself. I'll be linking it below. And let's just see how this works. So before using the FLTK theme, FLTK itself has built-in schemes that we can use without needing to import anything from the outside. So let's say with scheme, app scheme, GTK, and let's just comment this out. So you can notice the button itself, the shape of the button was changed. You also basically can perform your own theming inside your application. For example, let's add a method here called theme button, for example. which takes a button. And let's say we want to remove the focus here. So let's give our window a color first. So let's say when set color, and we'll import the color here, the enums color, maybe also the frame type, and let's import font as well. So let's say here the when set color, we'll use color white. You can also use a color from RGB or hex. And let's say, for example, the button, button clear visible focus, and let's give it a color here, set color, and let's say color from RGB. Let's say, so this is red. We can also use the enum value red. Let's just pass this here, so theme button. Let's see how this looks. So you can see this is what we get. You can also use certain methods to, for example, change the color into lighter or darker. So let's say here lighter. So you get this. Another thing in FLTK applications which come out of the box without needing to change anything in the user code is that if you press Control plus, it increases the size. Control minus decreases the size. So this is automatic. So here we use lighter. Let's use an active. Just look how this looks. Okay. Notice that when we click, we get back the color, so we need to change the selection color as well. So let's say say, for example, this, and let's say here darker. So when we click, we get the change in the color. We can change the font, we can change the frame type. So if we remove the scheme here, the GTK scheme, we can, for example, give it a frame type using the set frame method, and frame type rounded flat box. Oops. So you can see the box itself became a bit rounded. So now we'll actually contrast this to the FLTK theme crate. So we no longer need this. Remove this, and the Windows color. And basically, to create a theme, you basically call widget theme new, and then you apply the theme. So let theme, so widget theme new, theme type. And if you check the repo here, basically I have several themes inside this repo with the code samples. You basically get color themes, widget schemes. So here we'll be using, for example, let's use the arrow theme. Basically call theme apply. Basically that should be it, and we get the arrow theme. You can give the button a special color, for example, which are offered by the crate itself. So you can see here a group of frame types which can be used. So we'll be using this, for example. So this piece of code basically calls button set frame widget themes OS default. So we just need to import widget themes. So this is an S, and you can see we get the same color as here. So we remove the unused values, imports. And the second thing I wanted to show you is the theming, the layouting using the FLTK Flex widget. So FLTK Flex. Basically, we need to import flex and flex type. And basically, a flex box widget takes the size of the parent automatically without having to call size of parent or whatever. So if you give it, for example, let's say here, let mute flex equals flex default, this will automatically take the size of the window. Since this is also a group widget, it implements the group trait. Like the window, we need to call end. So let's, for example, put this button inside the flex widget. And let's create several of these. So, for example, so the default form is the row. Basically, can call column or row if you want to be specific about it. So here we'll use column. So you get the columns here. So only this is responding to the callback, since it's the one referenced last. So we'll change this. So now we have basically a column. We don't want it to fill the whole space of our window. So let's give it a size, for example, default with size, and let's say 390, 290. And we want it to be centered inside our window, center of parent. Okay, so basically we get this. So let's remove these extra buttons here. Let's add a frame, for example, which is basically a label, or in FLTK's term, it's a FL box. So let's mute frame default, and let's add on top of it an input widget. So let mute and let's import these. So here we can get the input in the frame. So this is the input widget. We get a frame here. So let's use, for example, a secret input instead. And when we click the button, we want to see basically what's inside the input itself. So let's make this a bit smaller. So let's say 200, 100, center of the parent. So let's see how this looks like. Okay, better. And a secret input basically can see whatever you're typing. And basically we want, when clicking the button, to basically show whatever is inside the input here. So basically we'll take the input and value, which which gives us back the string. Basically, frame set label, basically the value of the input here. So we need to import the input trait, so here. Okay, so enter anything, click, and this is what we entered basically. Again, maybe change something. So that's basically it for the idea of the theme and the flex widget itself. You can also, for example, since I'm not used to using flex widgets or flex boxes in HTML, CSS, you also have the option to basically debug these using the debug true. So this basically just shows you the outline of the flex box itself. So let's do something also interesting in our handler. Let's say we wanted to add hovering support for our button. If you notice here, when we pass our mouse on top of the button itself, we don't get any reaction. So let's say, for example, we wanted to support hovering. Let's create our own button, for example. So struct impl fn. We need to basically, if we're, for example, subclassing or deriving our own widget, basically we need to define a new method here. So let's say, for example, takes the same arguments as the any widget and a label. So let's say this takes a string. So basically, you'll notice that even though we use absolute coordinates for our button, this is ignored by the flex widget. Anyways, we'll use this basically. Said x, y, height, and here we'll be passing basically none, since this expects an optional to a static string, and we'll use it with label to pass the label here. The basic idea is that FLTK needs a long living string for the basic constructor, and let's return self button, and here we'll set the frame, the default frame, and basically we'll call the widget extends macro. So basically this will be my button, which extends button via the button member variable here. So for example, here we say my button default with label click. This should basically work. Okay, we also need to import the macro itself. So here we'll just use FLTK widget extends, and what else? The default. So just try something. Derive default. Okay. So we get this. However, the default, since we don't implement the default method itself or the constructor itself, this gets dropped. So basically we'll have to implement defaults here. Babafan default, which basically just calls new xy with, or zeros, basically 0 0 0 0. And if we were to take basically an optional to a static string, we'd pass none. However, here we'll just pass an empty string. So we get back the color, basically. So to implement, for example, hovering for our widget, basically we'll call the handle method, which also, like the set callback, takes a reference, mutable reference to the widget itself and the event. So here, let's say this is the button and the event, match the event, and the handle method itself basically expects a true or false. So false for whatever event we chose to ignore, false, and for whatever event we handle, basically we choose true. So event, let's say enter, basically, and leave. So these are the two events we'll need to handle. Just import these. So enums, these are in the enums module. So event, so this expects true, this is leave, this expects also true, since we handled these. And here, for example, we can set the frame type, set frame, basically we chose the OS default button up box. So what other frames do we have here? Let's try this. So this is in the widget themes. And here, basically, just return to whatever was there. We can change the color if needed. So, okay, so this expects to be redrawn. Okay, so you can see that this automatically changes on hover. If we try, this works. Last thing before we end this video, I wanted to show you the callback triggers. So for example, our input here, we want to show whatever is inside the frame automatically when we type, as we type inside the input. So just before going there, just fix some warnings here. So we don't need this. We don't need the braces now. And the callback here, 49, basically we don't use the button, so just use an underscore. And the input, maybe this will change. Okay, so here the input, let's say imp set trigger, and we'll be using the callback trigger enum. Changed. And here, basically import this callback trigger. So basically, whenever we change the whatever is inside the input, this triggers the callback, and we'll basically add a callback inside our input as well. So set callback, since we're going to be referencing our input, just give it a value here. And basically we take whatever is inside the input into the frames label. So here we'll set the label as the input's value, also reference to that, and here we get a move. Since the frame is moved inside this callback, we can't basically move it inside this one as well. So we can take advantage of Rust being an expression-based language. Basically just clone it here before the callback itself. So here let's say let mute frame equals frame clone, and these basically are cheap clones. That means that it's just a shallow copy, and as they say in C++, so this doesn't involve creating a new widget, etc. It just copies the pointer. So if we try to run this, so now when we type inside the input here, we can basically see that this changes automatically, and if we click, it's basically the same. So that's the basic idea of the set trigger method. Just a moment. Okay, I'm back. Just wanted to Rust format source main. Okay, and so as I was saying, basically since Rust is an expression-based language, the last expression is the one that is usually passed into the set callback, which is here the closure, and we take advantage of it. Instead of having to create our clones outside the scope of the callback, we can just create it here within the scope of the method itself, since this will just be moved inside the closure in the next call. That was basically it for this video. If, for example, for any reason you wanted to try out the other themes, for example, let's use the blue theme. So basically I have several themes you can choose from, and basically does the same thing. So that was basically it for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Bye.